you have a problem, you solve it with regex. Now you have two problems. um and like it just gets a bad rap, but really all it is just abstracting language into math, which is like my whole jam.
Welcome to another episode of Sheet Talking. Today we're talking with Tyler. He is a sheet game designer, creator, maker, and he's been doing this all for fun. He used to work at Zapier as a customer support representative, now works at Lego, literally creating Lego website. He is a fun dude in Spreadsheet. I've really enjoyed talking to him in the last couple years. I started Better Sheets. He started doing Google Sheets all during the pandemic. And I was really inspired. As you'll see in this talk, you'll see how I was inspired and what I still use to this day, something that Tyler showed me all about checkboxes, something that literally I've never seen anyone else do. So that's really exciting. And oh my God, he has so many cool things. We literally don't talk about much of what he's done, and it's vast. You got to go check out his website, atylerrobertson.com. He has a gallery in a spreadsheet of all the spreadsheet games he's made. Adventure games, chess games, as he'll mention, one of his best games he's ever made and one of his favorite children kind of thing. He'll talk about that in today's episode. Enjoy.
Do you actually talk to anyone else about spreadsheets? Because you and I talked about spreadsheets for a long time.
Yeah. uh
Do you talk about spreadsheets with other people?
kind of like the people I think in my personal life are sick of it a little bit. Like anytime I bring up a spreadsheet, they're like, "Oh, Tyler, go on. All right, we know you."
You say the word spreadsheets and my glasses fog up, and your
And
family and your friends don't like it.
well, yeah, I think they just like, because everyone has a perception of like what a spreadsheet is in their own lives, and it's really boring. And so this is kind of just like another thing in a long line of just strange hobbies I've had. So they're like, all right, whatever. Like we'll just wait for the next one. Maybe that one will be interesting.
What's your pre-sheet hobbies? What did you do before you made games inside of spreadsheets?
Oh gosh. So now I have to think. So that started well in the pandemic. So that started 2020. Before that, I was making a lot of chainmail, which I'm doing again now. I'm getting back into that. Boy, you okay over there?
Yeah,
Still,
getting must be my AC must not be on me. So chainmail, which is
yeah, doing a lot of chainmail.
that is equivalent boring to outsiders, I imagine. Like it is a lot of you made chainmail,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, it
that's equivalent boringness of spreadsheets, boringness of crocheting, like but
kinda.
very deeply interesting to people who are like you have to have the vision of the whole thing as you're making each thing, right?
Yeah. Well, and the funny thing about that is like in a way I kind of miss hobbies like that because when you're done, you have a product that like somebody who's not into the hobby can like see and appreciate for what it is. Whereas like when I started making spreadsheets, I would be done and I'd be like, look at this, it's so cool. And they'd be like, yeah, it's still a spreadsheet. Like it's not some like new thing that they can use in their everyday life that they think they can use in their everyday life anyway.
Right. Even yeah. I mean they use it in their everyday life and they don't want to use it in their non-everyday life. Like on weekends, they
Yeah,
don't want to deal with spreadsheets, even if it's a game. They're like, can we just play an actual game?
exactly. Yeah, which is fair, which is totally fair. So yeah, personal life, not so much. Online, I found a lot of people to talk to. Like Discord has been a really good place
Mhm.
for like spreadsheet stuff. And Co-host is a one of the newer like I'm trying to think of what it's
Oh.
closest to. It's similar, I think, to Tumblr. Yeah,
Mhm.
cohost.org. But it's run by literally just like four people. They were I'm trying to remember their full name, the anti-software software company, which I thought was really funny. And yeah, and so, it's places like that where people are kind of just like already coming to it with their own nerdy hobbies that they're like
Mhm.
more uh more ready to talk about that sort of thing.
And is it like I mean, okay, so I originally like I made a Facebook group called I Love Google Sheets or I Heart Google Sheets. And the intention of it, the initial intention of it was for people to share like interesting sheets they found. And I found out that there's only about like 12 people in the world that would do that. So it became
Yeah.
like a Q&A and help support sheet support forum. So like you're saying there's people who are like, are they sharing sheets and like saying, here's what I did in a sheet, and it's like something that's not necessarily like a business forecast?
Yeah, well, it's always gonna be a mix of both is the thing, right? So in Discord anyway, so I like run. I hesitate to say run because I don't really do anything, but there's a Discord server called Sheet Street, which is where like I kind of hang out. And so there we've got people who are um from all kinds of like places in their lives, and they're like, oh, here's like a cool thing I did with the spreadsheet, or here's like a cool idea I had. Um, and there's a lot of like sharing going on, but then there's also like separate channels for technical help, so if they run into a particular issue, that sort of thing. And that's been really cool because you kind of see like where people are at in terms of like how they're thinking about this sort of thing. And I keep trying to push like games and stuff, right? But people are taking some of those ideas and applying them to, there's a lot of education. There's a lot of teachers in that group. There's a lot of, weirdly, there's a lot of people in like high school and early college, which I did not really expect. And they're like, I mean, I've always been scared of youths, but like these kids are smart. Like these kids are figuring some stuff out that's really, really cool.
Yeah, they're native
And
to
it's
Google Sheets and the Google
yeah,
Workspace.
exactly, which is it's neat to see, even if it's not like exactly the kind of thing that I'm making.
Yeah, but it's an interesting group, right? Kids who are learning through play and playing through learning, like, and teachers who are also on the other side of that coin, right? Same coin, just different sides.
Yeah.
Um, it's so readily available. Like I think the reason is because Chromebook became super ubiquitous in schools, like in the last 10
Yeah.
years. And then
Yeah.
because of that, then everybody has access to Google Sheets, like legitimately, like just straight up, it's there. Not they don't even like you have to use Google Sheets, right? Because it's like in the Chromebook, right?
Yeah. Well, I haven't used a Chromebook. I would imagine there's probably a way to hack it to use like Office 365 or something, but
Yeah, Open Office or Office
why would you?
Libre or something. Yeah, it's a computer. It's still a computer.
Yeah.
So, but you had an interesting sort of double life for a while because while you were making spreadsheet games on your own was something you just enjoyed doing, you fell into it in the pandemic. But you were literally like, as you worked at Zapier, you were dealing with Google Sheets all the time and even dealing with supporting people using Google Sheets and Zapier. Um, and I thought that was such an interesting outlet too for you because I would read your articles you would write on the Zapier blog, right? Did you find like other people enjoyed that? Were you pushed to like write on the Zapier blog? Was that like something Zapier wanted you to do, or you were like, I just need to share this?
That's yeah. It was more the latter. It was more just like I have so much like in my brain now. I just need to like get it out. And the blog team there is just fantastic. So they helped like figure out what things were like real ideas, real things
That's helpful.
I could talk about. Um, and yeah, no, it was interesting because like working at Zapier. So for the viewers who may not know, so Zapier is an automation platform. You can do like can hook up Google Sheets to your CRM or something, and you can automate, every time I add a row, do this other thing. And Google Sheets is like one of the most popular things they integrate with. So we got a lot of Google Sheets questions, and I worked customer support there. And that's how I actually figured out that you could start making games in Google Sheets was uh, one of the Google Sheets questions was like, I don't remember the exact circumstances, but this person had a sheet with a lot of like formulas in it that would calculate based on time of day. And it like wasn't automating correctly. And I said, well, the first thing is like with that kind of formula, those formulas are only going to recalculate while you have the spreadsheet open.
Mhm.
Because that's just like, what we were used to is you open up the spreadsheet and then everything recalculates and then all the zaps fire. And they were like, well, no, I turned on the calculation. I went to the calculation settings and like turned it so it recalculates every hour. I had no idea that was a thing until that moment. So I was like, wait a second. And I went in and I found like, oh, geez, like there's so many other settings here that I've just like never touched.
Mm.
And that sort of started this like downward spiral into into the world of Google Sheets of like, oh, I can, turn on iterative calculation, I can turn on recalculation. And I used to make like really tiny small video games as a kid. Like I would play around with like Game Maker, RPG
Mm.
Builder, things like that. So anytime I'm playing with like a programming language, that's kind of where I like gravitate towards is game stuff.
Mhm.
Um, so that's how I started getting into like, oh, I can change an X and Y value here because of this thing that a customer showed me. Um, and then yeah, besides the blog post, it was a little annoying because everyone knew that I was like the Google Sheets guy. So I would start getting like Slack messages from my coworkers being like, "Hey, I'm working on this ticket that's Google Sheets related. Do you want to help?" And I'd be like, "Well, yeah, I guess."
That is true, right? The moment one person, it takes a couple of things, right? One, someone needs to overhear or understand you that you helped something with Google Sheets. But then they also have to like think you're the go-to guy. Like you're not the crazy one, they are. Like it's never the first person to a trend. It's always the second person that's the crazy one.
hmm
Like
hmm
like they have to, and it's, yeah, it is a bit embarrassing or like me? Like you think that's me? Like that I'm the Google Sheets guy? And that's what happened at my office too. How
Yeah.
similar origin story. But I also was frantically trying to come up with some identity in an office of new people. And so it
Yeah.
it was something I latched onto very quickly. And it sounds like you did too, once you started seeing me sort of like behind the curtain a little bit. You're like, oh, what else is here? Um, that same with me in AppScript. But I sort of already knew it because I had used Excel before, right? And I
Hmm.
learned Excel VBA. So I was like, this literally, they were like using Google Sheets, and I was like, is there something you can code in Google Sheets? Like I went looking for it, but yeah,
Yeah.
became the Google Sheets
Yeah.
guy in the office as well.
Yeah, and now I have to figure out. So I started a new job recently, and now I have to figure out Excel again. So
Oh my God.
all of none of my Google Sheets skills really carry over in the same way, but I thought they would.
Wait, so
So
so I get this question. I get an interesting question a lot, and then it ends up being a real Google Sheet problem in the Google Sheet world. Is that people come from Excel to Google Sheets and they need to learn. I get a lot of questions actually about, hey, I'm coming from Excel and how do I do? I used to be able to do this in Excel. How do I do this in Google Sheets? But you're literally the opposite. You're like, I have spent so much time in Google Sheets. How do I do this in Excel? What are
yeah.
some systemic uh challenges you've had?
Uh, I mean, so part of it for me is just figuring out the interface for one. Like
Yep.
I'm looking for, conditional formatting. Where did that go? Where is that button? Like, how do I make this text bold? Or even the other day, I was trying to do something where like I needed to split text a few different ways, and I was like, oh, this would be really nice if I could just use regex,
Mm.
which are words no one has ever said. But I was like, I would really love a regex formula here.
You
And
can't do regular expressions in Excel?
you have apparently you have to write a VBA function for it. And I was like,
What?
I this is not an important enough job to do that. So
I
I just
don't,
gave up.
that doesn't sound like Excel. I mean,
It
uh,
doesn't. It doesn't. I was surprised. So anyway, that I gotta dive back into that one, I guess. But
what I'm surprised at Excel, and I don't know. what I'm about to say is what I'm surprised at it, but I haven't interacted with it much lately. Whenever I see a screen share or like a video about someone showing me something in Excel, I'm just surprised at like the layout. You said the interface, that layout that's like all buttons, but it's like multiple layers of buttons where like
Yes.
Google Sheets does have that, like, but it's sort of a little obfuscated around. There's some menu items, and I think Excel still has menu items, but there's just like so many buttons.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of been like the Microsoft design challenge for a while, right? Because you get that in Word, you get that in PowerPoint, you get that in all of their tools. So I think if you're already used to like Microsoft's sort of way of thinking, maybe it's easier, but I've just been doing Google stuff for so long that I've unlearned all of it.
Yeah. And so do you find yourself just always frustrated because you were so much at home for a while in Google Sheets and you were exploring deeply into it, and then you're like, is it like a sunk fallacy cost? Like you're like, okay, do I now jump in hard in Excel, or do I just like, I'm now a regular person here. I'm not the Excel guy.
It 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 depends. It depends is the thing. I think like I don't see myself making games in Excel, right? In the same way that I've made games in Google Sheets, just because I I don't see that as like really being fun if I have to struggle to relearn stuff where I'm like, ah, but I know how to do this in Google Sheets. Like, let me just do it. I haven't really like found the fun there yet, I guess I should say. And for work stuff, like luckily, like I'm a programmer. Like if there's something that really needs to get done in Excel, I'm just gonna probably write a script for it. And like
Yeah, you're programming
that'll
now. That's a big
yeah,
change.
yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. It's sort of like, I've been doing programming and like engineering work for a while, but like being an engineer, like a capital E engineer now is uh daunting almost.
Mhm.
Because now I have to do it for money.
They must have loved which game did you present as your like resume? You were like, oh, I'll show you this Google Sheet game.
I so
No, you
no,
didn't.
so I didn't was a
Yeah.
thing. We said this before we started recording. So currently I work as an applications engineer for the Lego Group. And my interview for that was really kind of intimidating because I had like,
Mhm.
well, because it's a big company that like a lot of people respect. And I had like Googled the hiring manager and like found a bunch of their like talks, and they're very well respected in the industry. And like I was just sitting there being like, "Nah, I make spreadsheet games.
So it came up
So I
then
just
in the
so
interview.
I didn't bring it up at all. And
Oh,
they do like coding skills tests and stuff. And it was after I got offered the job that they were like, "Oh yeah, and we looked at your website, and like everyone really loves there's the I think it's still one of the top things on my website, but it's I remade the spreadsheet from the music video for Dilemma.
dilemma.
So yeah, yeah. So it's Nelly or is it Nelly? Yeah, I think that's right. And
Oh yeah,
Kelly
the
Rowland.
yeah, Kelly.
Uh and she's sending the text message that says, where you at, Holla, when you get this?
Yeah,
But then
yeah.
it cuts to the phone and it's a spreadsheet. So I made a website that just looks like that phone with that spreadsheet, but it actually sends texts. So it hooks into like the Twilio API to send SMS messages. And so after the fact, the hiring manager was like, "Oh yeah, everyone loved that."
Because they're that old that they're like, this is lovely. That's
Yes,
the reference
exactly.
they can get. Everyone who's like 25 and 30 years and younger or something is not gonna get.
God. Yeah, I'm 32. I'm like just barely there.
Yeah.
But yeah, for a certain generation, that joke really lands.
I think, I mean, I didn't do exactly that, but I think I tried to do something similar. Like when they were talking about leaving, everybody was leaving Twitter for like a while. I
Hmm.
created a Twitter inside of a Google Sheet. And it has like it doesn't connect to an outside source, but it's like a similar thing, right? A chat like interface. Um, and I don't know if other people appreciate these like strange machinations, right? Where you're like, take this existing thing that we're all used to entering data in and then stopping, and like open it up to the world. And people are like, well, couldn't you just use your like phone? Like, shouldn't you just like send a text message? And you're like, no, but
Shouldn't,
it's a spreadsheet.
couldn't you just use Twitter?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Twitter still exists. Like, can you just tweet? Like, wouldn't tweeting be easier? And then there's also like other social media, like they're like Mastodon, which is hard to use as well. As hard to use as a spreadsheet. And I always wonder, like, I've been doing this professionally for coming on 3 years, and I'm wondering like if the framing is completely wrong here. Like, is it like I built this thing in a spreadsheet? Just meh, nobody cares. Like, or like, oh, I don't know what other framing to do here.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because like a lot of the stuff that I have made over the years, like I'm really proud of because I made it work in a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And like that constraint is part of what brings me joy about the process. And I like, especially in the stuff that I put like in my portfolio, it's all things that I do without like any extra scripting. I'm really constraining myself to just the built-in functions of Google Sheets. And for someone who knows Google Sheets and someone who's used Google Sheets, that's more impressive because they understand those constraints. But for the outside world, they hear spreadsheet and they think taxes. And it well, and like, gosh, I still get like LinkedIn messages being like, hey, can you help me optimize the performance of this like end of year business spreadsheet? And I'm like, I don't know anything about that. No, sir, I cannot. I can make it worse. I can make it run slower. Like,
Yeah, for a
um,
little bit, I was like consulting with someone who was working for like a roofing company. I'm
mhm.
like, sure, I'll do that. But like someone like you who's like doing spreadsheets for fun, you're like, no,
No
why would
interest.
I do that? This is not
Yeah,
my
but
life.
that's and I have to just acknowledge now that that's like
Yeah.
the opposite direction that everyone's coming from. And so, finding ways to talk about it that make it sound fun are really difficult. Um, and I think, one of the things that I would like to move towards, and it's been a while since I've really made anything like really creative in a spreadsheet. Like I haven't been posting a lot. I've been off Twitter, like you said. And the reason for that is I would really love to make something where I can just show it and it's cool on its own, and then
Yeah.
it's in a spreadsheet. Does that make sense? Like
Yeah.
it being a spreadsheet is not core to its coolness anymore. But that's a very difficult thing to do as well.
Yeah, it is. But it's so funny that you talk about constraints though, and how like the constraint, like the obstacle is the way is like the old stoic idea. That the constraint is the thing that makes it interesting, right? Like that's what old hackathons are like. That's what why puzzles are so good or so interesting. Like that's why Rubik's Cube is still like a thing. It's like you have this thing and it's gonna be solvable. It's in this tiny thing. But I also want to recognize that like you do things, you have a special gift, and I don't know many people other than you that there's just not many people that do this where you take a constraint to its nth ideation, like you do something with that constraint that no one else would have thought of. And you taught me something really interesting that I still use a lot, or I show it off to like, and it's so stupid. So it's a lot of buildup to something too
Love it.
completely
Great.
stupid.
Good.
But you did it in one of your videos, because you also made videos of like, here's how I made the thing, which was like awesome. A lot of people who have made things in a spreadsheet will just show the thing. Even Labnol, who like shows has some teaching stuff, he'll very much only make a thing and then show it, not show how it's made. And then I have friends who have made startups inside of a spreadsheet, or at least the interface that someone was using was a spreadsheet, and they'll never reveal how they made it or any code behind it because it's their business. And
Yeah.
so I was like, I loved that you were like, here's literally every single step. And you made like 30 or 45-minute videos where I was like, okay, I'm gonna watch this whole thing. Um, and you okay, there's a lot of buildup. You made a checkbox bigger than the cell that it's in.
Yeah.
And I show that to people and they're like, wait, you could do that? I was like, right? Like, what? And then you did one extra thing. Again, this is just you taking something to like the nth degree where I was like, okay, that's cool. Like now it's a big checkbox, but it doesn't show it. Like the cell limits what you see, but you can still see that it's like a line through it.
Yeah,
So
you see the check a little bit still.
yeah, and you figured out that if you change the foreground color and the background color to the same color, then it doesn't check, like it doesn't work. So you have it
Yeah.
one like
It's
pixel
worse than
off.
that. It's worse than that because if you set them to the exact same color, the exact same hex code, then Google Sheets says, oh, this is a hidden checkbox. Are you sure you still want to click that? Which is like a safety thing, and I get it.
Mhm.
But if you change the hex code of the foreground color, or either one of them, to 1 point different, then it's like, oh, you're fine,
Yeah,
even though the human eye can't see the difference.
at all. Like it's I mean, maybe it's also like a man thing. I can't like maybe I'm a little colorblind or something. Like I can't tell it.
That's fair. I think men are statistically more likely to be, what is it, is red green colorblind,
Yeah, like
something
I
like
can't
that.
tell some shades either. Like I talk about that a lot in videos where I'm like, oh yeah, like there's a lot of it is a weird tangent, but a lot of people will do conditional formatting, and I'm just like such anti-conditional formatting. Just like you're like, oh, I don't want to code anything. I want to do everything with these like constraints. I'm like, please don't do conditional formatting. Now, when something is colored, I have to like scroll through it and figure out all the colors and count the colors. But then half the time, I don't even know that that's a color. You're using so many different colors. And funny enough, or well, not funny, but interesting enough, like actually like semi-blind or like um uh what's the when you're blind but to medically blind? No, not medically
Oh,
blind.
like legally blind.
Legally.
I feel like there's a different term for that now, but
Oh,
that's what I know it as. I don't know if
yeah.
I'm right
So
about that.
someone that's legally blind is a member and was like, yeah, thank you. Like not just thank you, but like, oh yeah, now I can do things that everyone else was like doing that I couldn't tell. I was like, oh yeah, like there are such a large number of eye disabilities that like
Yeah.
it covers the spectrum of like, yeah, if you're gonna do conditional formatting and everything's red or green, you're like, you're gonna like 10 to 15% of your people who use this are not gonna be able to use it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a thing that I think about a lot too is like, ability is temporary, right? Like if
Yeah.
you're making something that's going to be used for a long time, you're also going to want to make sure that like you as a person can continue to use it for a long time. So you need to think about like colors and contrast. Even if you're, young now, like your eyes will not always be as good as they are currently.
Yeah. That was a weird tangent to say. Yeah, that checkbox thing is so funny. It's funny because to this day, I mean, I have it in a couple of my tutorials of like, oh, do this thing. And I have it in a spreadsheet that I give away, check anything, where the
Hmm,
button, the same thing, a big checkbox button that's colored like that. Um,
nice.
and like, I still don't, I've never seen it anywhere else. No one has ever mentioned that ever. And like, of course, right, there's an infinite number of ways to use Google Sheets and like
Yeah.
spreadsheets. So maybe it just was one of those things. But yeah, you had this really interesting thing. You went to that, you just kept going with it, like that nth degree, just kept going. It was really cool.
I mean, genuinely, like that's just one of those things that came out of the pandemic that like, all right, there's I guess my silver lining, sure. Like at the time, my partner and I lived like an hour outside of Cambridge here in England, and like literally next to a cow pasture, right? Middle of nowhere. We don't drive. We had to walk like 40 minutes to get to a grocery store, like one of those kind of things. And we had to stay home because everything was locked down. And so I just spent all my time in Google Sheets. And, I got to the point where I was like, how to make a button in Google Sheets. And everyone's pointing you towards macros and, Google Apps script and things like that. And I was like, no, just want I want like a checkbox, but I want it to look like a button.
Mhm.
And then I think to get to that point where I figured out the color thing, I was maybe like 4 or 5 months of just kind of hammering away at like
Oh.
various ideas. I know that the thing that I do in a lot of my games now, and you can kind of see like the progression of this is I have the checkbox set up, but I use formulas to determine which checkbox was clicked most
Mhm.
recently. So it's not just like an on-off toggle, it's more like a button press. And getting that figured out, I knew I wanted that like a year before I actually figured it out.
Wow.
Like it just took forever because, again, like you said, nobody talks about it because there are these other ways of doing it.
Mhm.
Um, so everyone just has kind of accepted the other ways as like being right. And I was like, well, I've got the time. I'll I'll keep plugging away until it works the way I think it should work.
Yeah, I mean, it was like so many things, right? And it's all play, right? This is such an interesting part of going deep on Google Sheets is, of course, the people watching this are going to be the fellow nerds and fellow geeks that are going to geek out on this stuff and be like, yeah, like they won't think it's weird that you like spent a lot of time in Google Sheets and tried a lot of different things. I'm like, I think if someone else was talking to you, it might be like, how did you figure that out? But I think I know it's like you just tried a lot of stuff and the time wasn't like a year of experiment after experiment of like you had a hypothesis and you tried it this way. You're just like one of those subconscious things that happens to me too. I come up with an idea. I go, I wish that was possible. Or I question myself, I'm like, is that possible? I go about it I'm like, oh, let me take the afternoon. I got nothing to do until 6 p.m. And then you end up waking up with drool 2 days later, and you're like, wait, where was I? Oh, did I figure it out yet? No, okay. And then it's just like in the back of your head in the subconscious for like months or weeks or months or years, and you're like, oh wait, I can do that now.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I woke up in okay, so there was a moment in my life, like I've been using Google Sheets for almost 10 years now. And coding in Google Sheets, AppScript for almost 10 years. And about 2 years into it, I was trying to do something in Google Sheets where I needed two tabs to be synced in different ways. Like I needed the data to be on both tabs. And Airtable at the time was coming out and you can do that in Airtable where because it's not a database, it's like there's a database behind it. And so it can show you all different views of this data. Um, but for other reasons, I couldn't use Airtable. So I went back to Google Sheets. And then maybe a year ago, so this is like 7 or 8 years
Yeah.
later, I literally woke up in the middle of the night at midnight and I go, oh, I think I got it. And 20 minutes later, I coded this app script that synced two tabs. And I'm like, oh, okay, it's possible. I could do it. What? Like,
That's
why
just,
did I
yeah.
think of it that then?
That's just how so much of this stuff happens, like, and that goes for so many things in this realm, right? Like programming or like crafting or I don't really know any car mechanics, but I'm sure they run into
Mhm.
similar things of like, oh, why is this engine like not working the way I want it to? And
Oh,
then they'll be in the
that's
shower and be like, of course, the carburetor,
oh yeah, that's what
whatever.
that wire
Like,
does.
yeah. Just because there's so much like interconnecting stuff. And it's difficult, especially like I think in the environment we're in right now, we have a lot of like opportunity to share information. But it's so much of it is like gamified in a way. Like you've got like Stack Overflow, is like a really popular resource for programmers, but because of the way that people are incentivized to give answers, usually they're favoring like sort of the fast and dirty, not dirty, but like here's sort of the person just like quickly writing something out and being like, yeah, just do this. And there's no real time spent on like context or further explanation. And so if you're a person who studied things in this world for as long as you or I have, you've just got all this like random information in there. And sometimes you just need to like do something else to let it all connect.
Yeah, and sometimes you just need to spend time. I mean, funny enough, right? There's people that have spent more time in Google Sheets than you or I, but they're also not gonna like have the deep interactions with it, right? It's sort of, I think some nut is loose where it feels like fun, it feels like playful, and so you spend a lot of time there, but also deep time, not just like, I mean, I know a lot of people who spend a lot of time in spreadsheets and they're not doing much. They're doing
Yeah.
data entry, right? Or data analysis even, which is a hard computational thing and hard to figure out. And it's hard, like it's a very intelligent thing to do, but they're not necessarily like using spreadsheets to their maximum ability. It's like you really need to just spend some time exploring and like playing.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and like nothing against people who just want to be in a spreadsheet and like do not think much about it. Like that is a-okay, right? Like you
I don't
you do
know about
you.
that.
Like I'm not trying to tell everyone they need to make games in spreadsheets, right? Like I think the thing that I would rather people take away from this is like it's okay to have fun with whatever weird thing you're into. Um, be that spreadsheets or be that something else. Um, because it's at the end of the day, like it's a tool like anything else.
I mean, there's sort of like a problematic way that I'm thinking about it too, where sometimes people are paid for their time and they're spending that time in spreadsheets. And so no matter what, even if they learned a faster way to do it or they learned some other way to do it, they would still be paid for their time. And some people are scared of saying, okay, if I do this faster, then I need to do more things because I'm just paid for my time. Uh,
Ooh,
and I think
yeah,
there's that's problematic for a few different reasons. But
yeah,
what's interesting too is someone it's problematic for me as well because I was so lazy. God, I was so lazy for years. I would try to not, I would figure out a way to do it without doing it. So I would spend more time figuring out the programming way than if I just did it. Oh, can you calculate this, this, and this? Yeah, but I don't. I'm like, how do I? And I spend 2 days figuring out how to automate this thing that I could have just done in half an hour. Right? Like
yeah,
that's a
totally.
problematic way for me. Like,
Yeah, yeah, and I think, gosh, I mean, it's the thing you said about knowing how to do it faster, but being paid for your time is such like just such an issue right now, and especially with like AI being a thing and people sort of leaning towards getting things done more quickly. I think a lot about like how all of the advances that we have in technology over the last 30, 40 years have been so geared towards like, here's a faster way to do it and a faster way to do it and a faster way to do it. But we're still working the same amount of time. Like, we're more stressed out than ever. Like we're none of us are sleeping well. We've sort of like efficiencyed our way into this weird pit of despair. And so, now when I look for a faster way to do something, or when I look for rather an alternative way of doing something, be it like you said, like I'm gonna code a new way to like calculate whatever instead of doing it the way that I know works. It has to be for fun. It has to be because I enjoy it more.
yeah.
Because I'm gonna work the same amount of time anyway. Like that's just how like capitalism works
Do you think that'll
now. Is like,
continue?
um, I,
Isn't that more like a zero sum game? Like, is it that shouldn't we be
yeah,
growing?
I, do you mean like will the 40-hour work week continue or like,
Yes and no. I mean, there is a huge 4 day week work week a movement now. Uh,
yeah,
and there's so many. Sorry, this conversation can go many ways because there's so many ways to live now. Like not just the
Mhm.
number of hours you work, but how you work those. Like gig work was a big thing for a while, which was supposed to be freeing, but that ended up being a different problematic. I work for myself, so I there are moments when I work much less time, but I never not work. Like
Yeah.
uh that's problematic in its own way. So now I'm working 100% of the time instead of like during a 40-hour work week. Um, but also I have, autonomy to not work, right? So, but do I take, I'm American, so I never take time off.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think us as Americans are particularly we've got that weird capitalism brain happening still.
Right. So like, I mean, there's just so
Yeah.
many ways to live, right? But there's also so many
Yeah.
ways to work. And like the percentages of who works what is, I think is just going to get more dramatic, like sorry, more varied. Different
Mhm.
people will work differently, which allows people with disabilities to work, which allows people who want to work but not necessarily in the way you want them to work, right? People who will explore curiosity. And there's also non-Amer so America's bad at like rewarding non-work, whereas other countries are like actively participating in cultural not, oh my god, I was gonna say cultural appropriation, that's not it. They're making more culture, like they're
Yeah.
actively doing more. For instance, I just found out for like the last 20 or 40 years or something, Canada has part of their AI research has been put towards curiosity projects. That's like what
Hmm.
they label them. And like the US doesn't do that. You have to like have a definitive reason for doing something. And they're like, no, let's like give 20% of our budget to like whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to say it was Denmark. I just saw this in the news sometime this month, but I'm pretty sure it was Denmark started like a $340 a week stipend for artists.
Right.
Just I forget like, few hundred artists just so they could like work for a year on the thing that they wanted to work on. So it was like kind of a government grant, but also kind of like almost a universal basic income kind of experiment.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, I think definitely like the the advances we're seeing in technology, like you said, are going to be helping allow more people to work differently. And I think we just have to rethink like what does business look like in that
Yeah.
in that new world?
I mean, there's such a strange amount of alternative lifestyle because I also live a very alternative lifestyle, and I will admit it wholeheartedly, and I will say like more people should try it, but I'm never forcing anyone into my work style. But like, I used to work on cruise ships, and it was a 6-month contract, 7 days a week of work, 12 to 14-hour work days because there's literally nothing else to do. You want to leisure, but like, where would you leisure? Um, and it's like up there. There's like literally an international law for most maximum hours you can work in a day and a week, and
Hmm.
like it was always almost there. Um, and but then you had a 2-month vacation. You had 6 weeks off or 8 weeks off,
Oh wow.
and it also rings true of like teachers who have 9 months of work and then 3 months off. There's
I mean,
oil
teachers
workers,
teachers is a weird example because it's not really off, but
right?
I get your meaning.
Well, like university is probably actually off. And then but
Oh,
university
sure.
they get off, but they don't get paid. So they have to take on grants which pay them, which makes them have to work all year round. So
Yeah.
like I listen to a lot of Cal Newport and he specifically doesn't take the grant so that he can work on his books in the downtime. Um, but those are like alternative lifestyles that have been around for ages, right? But they're going to be more and more available to people to be like, I only found out about this like almost in the last 5 to 10 years that like executives can take sabbaticals, which
Mhm.
you're like sort of like almost you can take a sabbatical anytime you want because they'll just not pay you. But there's some companies who will continue paying you on your sabbatical or force you to take a sabbatical, which is like 6 months off. But also, it's not necessarily off because some people will be like, well, I'm just going to make something else.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing too, is like, what are you actually resting with that time, or are you like working on your side project?
I mean, again, so I'm sorry to talk about more alternative lifestyles, but like paternity leave, right? Paternity
Yeah.
leave didn't even exist for a while, at least in the US, and is now becoming more and more of a thing. And then maternity leave was like criminally low or didn't even exist. So like that is going to become 6 months, 9 months, 18 months, years, right? Like, I
Yeah. Hey, as long as they need, honestly. Like,
feel like my son's 2 and I still need, uh, um,
yeah.
still need a few years left of um, right. So like, I think there's just going to be more percentage of people in all of these different types of work, right? Like, but also some people love their work and take a healthy balance. They'll take a Friday off every couple of weeks. They'll have summer Fridays. I know a lot of PR agencies in LA take summer Fridays. Great. That really changes up the landscape of how you work and what you do, during the whole year.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, the thing I think for all of us to remember throughout that is like the money's got to come from somewhere. And so, if you are a person who like,
Mhm.
if you're okay, I'm talking to the audience now. If you're like an artist, or if you're a person who's already doing this and you're like making your money off of Ko-Fi or Patreon or like whatever, like all this. But for like us as people who either you work for yourself, but you've got like a somewhat more traditional business model, or like for me who works for a large company, like for people who are not spending their lives on Patreon or Ko-Fi or like uh PayPal. Where else do people do this now?
Cash
Like
App,
we have
OnlyFans.
yeah, OnlyFans, totally. Like we have to remember that like the people who are doing that work, it's still work that like needs monetary support because of like the world that we live in. So like we need to foster a culture of supporting artists as individuals. That like used to be a thing of like being a patron of the arts, right? But that was still like that was the rich people being patrons of the arts. And I think in a lot of ways, the technology that we have now allows us to all kind of be patrons of the arts in very small ways. So if there's a podcast that you like, guaranteed they have a Patreon that you can like kick a couple bucks towards, right? And that I think is going to be the real um next sort of shift in
Mhm.
work as a thing, is we all know that we want art and we want fun and we want joy in our worlds, but we also know that like the people who make that stuff for us need us to support them. So it becomes like a sort of a symbiotic thing.
Yeah.
As a I don't want to say as a society, because that's like a Joker thing now. Doesn't he say that? But like,
But I mean,
as
you're
people, as
talking
humans,
about
that like,
you're speaking very interestingly about the creator economy, right? Like, and entertainment as a whole is also getting varied, and entertainment still needs to be paid for, needs to
yeah,
have some monetary funds, right? Um, and what that
yeah,
entertainment
and
is
like,
coming in all forms. I mean, you entertained yourself by creating stuff in spreadsheets, but also entertained others, right? Um, and they're it's funny because I remember, I don't know if this is an interesting segue, but you talked very specifically before when you're like, oh, someone was selling, they were charging someone for a template, and you're like, oh, let me just do it. I just want to share this with you for free. I'm like,
yeah, yeah.
oh, sorry, was that a
I
bad
know
note?
I can speak more specifically towards that. So when so Sheetle, which you helped me like sort
Yeah,
of
yeah.
market, and we put on Product Hunt and everything. So when I was first starting to play around with that, I got an email that was like, hey, can you like show me how to edit this template? I want to sell it to schools.
Hmm.
And they're like, I want to sell it $100 a spreadsheet to teachers.
Hmm.
And I was like, hell no, absolutely not.
Hmm.
Because I like I know where teachers are coming from in that scenario where like they already have to buy their own materials in
Yeah.
the States. They're not getting paid enough. Uh, God, the States, uh, there's so many things that like makes being a teacher just this like horrible thing that for some reason like people still want to do, and I'm very thankful
Yeah.
that they still want to do it because we need teachers in this world. And I was like, no, absolutely not. You are not going to charge a
Mhm.
teacher $100 for this thing that I made in my underwear. Like, absolutely not. So I made a video just being like, here is how to edit it. And I just put it on YouTube and I was like, all right, there you go. It's free, it's out there. And now like this guy can't do that. Because there needs to be a balance, right? Of like,
Mhm.
yes, obviously like work and like knowing how to do stuff in spreadsheets is valuable, but it's not that valuable. And it's not that valuable. It's not valuable enough to make me feel okay with taking advantage of that particular market.
Well,
Right.
yeah, it was interesting
Like,
that he was trying to take advantage of a situation too. And, it's such an interesting thing. I would always encourage people to sort of look at every part of the business model, or not business market, right? And look at, there are some people who not only can afford, but want to pay down that time. And then there's the people who want to watch 45-minute tutorials and get it and they'll invest that time when they don't
yeah,
have that money. And then everything in between, right? Like, oh, I'll have a edited video for you. I'll have the template plus a how-to video for $50 or $5. And then I'll have like, I'll come and do it for you for $100 custom, right? Like there can be every part of that market, um, sort of.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And like having said all of that too, like I literally just did some freelance work for somebody who emailed me and was like, hey, can I pay you $100 to like make this thing for me? And I was like, yeah, okay, sure, why not? Because they offered, right?
Yeah,
And it's somebody coming to me and being like, hey, can I resell your work for a profit? So like I didn't actually do anything. Like that
that was
doesn't
such
sit
a
well with
strange
me, like
scenario. Yeah.
morally. Yeah. Um, if
I
it,
mean,
if it were
I
like
had
if
to,
it were like, hey, I want to take money from like, CEOs or something who already have so much money, then that'd be a different conversation, maybe.
who are paying down that time. They're like, yeah, I can
Yeah,
earn $3,000 an hour, and I'm happy to pay you $1,500 for this thing. Like, yeah, like,
exactly.
and then there's
Because
the
they're
people
doing that
who are
with so
like,
many things already.
yeah, that just reminds me, and this is a very different situation, but it was an interesting situation where I created Only Sheets, which is like a paywall for Google Sheets if you want to sell a Google Sheet,
Mhm.
and the only reason someone made that as well, like months later. And the only reason I know that is because they like tagged me in it and they're like, this was inspired by. And I looked at it, and I was like, you're just selling the same thing, but it's just like a different name. And I was like, oh, like, okay, like I wasn't butthurt about it. I was like, yeah, it's a good idea. That's why I made the thing. But then they went out of their way to be like, but I didn't look at it. I didn't see what you did. I was like,
Mhm.
do you want to? Like, shouldn't you see what I did to see if it works? Because like it's not doing well. Like there's only like 12 people in this world who are selling Google Sheets. I don't know
Yeah.
why you copied me, but did it in a way in which you actively were like, but I didn't look at the code. I'm like, just look at the code. It's one line of code. You could
Yeah.
probably do a
Yeah. Well,
better version than I did.
and that's the thing that I that drew me towards Google Sheets as like a programming platform in the first place is you can click on a cell and you can see the formula, right?
Mhm.
There's no
You can
obfuscation there of
open the
like,
app script. Yeah, you can see the
right.
script. Yeah.
And that's all very intentional. Is like I would love it for people to reuse my spreadsheets. Like I put them online for a reason.
Yeah.
I made the code like there and available for you. It's not like it's not the same as like building a commerce website where you need to keep stuff private, right? I'm not trying to run some like big Google Sheets business. It's all
I am.
intentionally very open.
I
You
am,
are,
and I'm
yeah, yeah,
still
yeah.
very
But
open.
Exactly, because it's part of the thing that you're bringing to it is that educational aspect
Yeah.
and your years of knowledge and your like uh your just weird career too. Like I remember when I was first talking with you, you were bringing up stuff that I was like, hey, I didn't know that could ever be a job, like the stuff you've done on cruise ships, right? And like just your approach to like the things that you're building in Google Sheets is stuff that I never would have thought of. And like just having that brings value, right? Even if the formula itself is like
Yeah.
just there for people to use.
Yeah, and like there's a I don't also funny enough, like I don't think of any other course creator in even in Google Sheets as a competitor. There's someone
Yeah.
who's also selling a Google Sheet courses, Ben Collins, and he did an entire course on the query formula, which is literally one of the formulas that I have in my mind is a third rail. Like I will not touch it. Like same as
Yeah.
you don't touch app script, like I do not touch query. And people will ask me about query. I'm like, nope, just go to that guy. Like he made a course about it. I don't even want to try. Um,
Yeah.
and there's so many angles possible, right? That like go do it. Like teach. Uh, and then funny enough, I'll bring it up again. There's so many parts of the market, right? There's people who want to learn, but there's also people who just want to get this thing done. Calling back all the way to our first thing of can we not our first thing, what we referenced before about getting work done faster. There are people who are like, yeah, I just want this done. And I'll pay anything, or I just don't want to pay with my time. Right. They're like, how
Yeah.
can I do this as fast as possible with at least effort? And I have no money. And I'm like, okay, well,
Yeah.
okay.
Pick two, right?
Yeah, you can only make two of these. Um, I wanted to ask you a few questions though before you leave.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, if you could bring answer these questions, it would be very helpful. I mean, well, first off, about your work, what's like the favorite game that you created? Because you've created it. I have my own favorite. I like the adventure game that you made, that you move the guy across. I was like, oh, this is amazing. What's your favorite game that you've made?
Oh God. It's like it's not quite like picking my favorite child because I don't really think of them that way. It's
Oh,
just like picking my favorite like weird Frankenstein creation. Um, I sorry, I'm literally just pulling up the list now because there's too many. Um, gosh, I'm really happy with I made this match three game, like Bejeweled
mhm.
style, like match three. Um, that's like
What is
just
match three?
fun and so like
Echo? No.
no, so like did you ever play like Bejeweled on like
Yes.
smartphones back in the day? Yeah,
Yeah.
so one of those, right, where you swap two tiles and then if three of the same color line up, they disappear and then all the
Ah,
other tiles fall down. So I made that
wow.
which is like it's just such a simple concept that it's sort of always a little entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
Even though like it's not the fanciest presentation or whatever. So I'm really happy with that. So I think that or Sheet Delver was another one that I was really happy with, which is
Mm-hmm.
like a first person like dungeon crawl kind of
Mm-hmm.
game. Partly because like the first person was a really cool thing to try because I had to like programmatically make objects like appear further away and like make them sort of gain resolution as they get closer. Um, which was a fun problem to figure out. And then the
Wow.
maps are also randomly generated.
Mm-hmm.
So that was another like kind of interesting thing. So you can kind of like poke around at it for a while and still get something fresh out of it.
That's amazing. Those are two like people should be like, you can do that in Google Sheets. Like they should be like
Yeah.
wide-eyed, like, wait, I gotta check this out. Your site, I mean I'll leave a link to in the description, but your site
Mm.
is a Tyler Robertson.com.
A. Tyler Robertson. Yep. Because my name is common enough that I'm just one of them.
Are you where do you start? Are you an A1 or a B2 kind of guy?
Oh, that's an interesting question. It really depends on what I'm making. Um, I for example, so I was revisiting my chess spreadsheet recently, and so for that I started at like A21 or something like that because I knew I wanted to like put stuff down there first and then have stuff above it.
Oh, that's okay.
Um,
So you ended up
I
you
ended up putting stuff in A1
don't have
eventually.
this 21 row header. Like, oh my God.
No, don't tempt me though. That'd be definitely something I could do.
Right. So you're an
I
A21
think,
one.
yeah, I think eventually I get to put stuff in A1. But it maybe takes me a while to get back up there.
Okay. That's quite a roundabout way of answering that, but we'll take it. What's your favorite formula?
Ooh.
You have like 500 options here.
I this is really tough. I really like regex extract,
Whoa, that's a
which
deep one.
like
Deep cut.
yeah, so and nobody really thinks about it either because like regex has this reputation sort of similar to like the query command,
Mhm.
right? Where like, oh, it's just so complex and like it causes so many problems. And I read a book about regex a while ago where like the leading quote was, "You have a problem, you solve it with regex. Now you have two problems." Um, and like it just gets a bad rap, but really all it is just abstracting language into math, which is like my whole jam. um and regex extract lets you do a lot of really powerful things like you can obviously look for patterns in words. You can take like in any of my games that are laid out in like a grid, one of the things that you can do is um how do I want to say this? You can abstract that grid as a grid of letters and numbers, and
Mhm.
then you can join them all into one long string. And then you can use
Mhm.
regex extract to determine where any one character is in that string, both uh,
Mhm.
horizontally and vertically. So you can say like if I know that I need whatever character is 7 characters across and 9 lines down, you can use regex extract to figure out what that character is.
I followed you 100% of the way because I've seen you do that before. I hadn't explained that before, and this is like not the first time I'm hearing you say that. So if someone's listening and they're like, "What did he just say?" Yeah, like I get it. It's a pretty brilliant thing. I think I ended up. I think when you showed that or you have that in a video of some sort where you explain
Mhm.
that in another way, or you just show it in a sheet. I think I used it. I think I use that often when somebody's like looking for certain words in like a group of cells. I'll join everything together and just search that one cell. There's a little bit
Yep.
of character limit there, like the way you did it. You're never over that character limit. But when I'm doing it, when I'm like adding a bunch of words and like or paragraphs or something to one cell, you get into the limits a little bit. But it's fine. Yeah, it's a really cool way to like work with sheets and sort of another dimension. Like it.
Yeah.
Thanks, man. It's been a pleasure. Is there anywhere else other than a tylerrobertson.com you want to send people to? They can play games
Um,
there. They can get the sheets, watch videos.
yeah, that's kind of the place for everything right now. Like that's got a link to everything I make. I'm not super active right now, I guess. Like I'm not posting a whole lot of stuff. Like I said earlier, like I'm kind of just like I'm finding some of the things that are just fun, like on their own again. Like there's a couple of projects that I'm working on that will probably be out, I guess, by the time this
Do
video is out. So,
you want to
go to the
talk about
website
them
to look
now?
for those. I can, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So one of the things that I really want to get going, I think I'm aiming for August, but I don't have an exact date yet, is a Google Workspace game jam. Game jams, if you go to like itch.io, you can see game jams are a pretty popular thing where you get just a certain amount of time and maybe a theme and you make a game.
Mm-hmm.
And usually people are just like make it whatever programming language you want, or sometimes there will be restrictions like it has to be a pen and paper game, or you have to use
Mhm.
dice or whatever. And so my restriction is use anything in Google Workspace. So slides,
Sweet.
sheets, docs, and spend, I don't know, a week just figuring out what kind of games you can make, because there's so many possibilities in there that like I know I won't be able to think of all of them on my own. Um, and I think it'd be fun just to get a bunch of people together
Yeah.
to sort of hack away at those.
Could be a great
So
long
that'll
weekend
be,
or something. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I think that'll be August. I don't, like I said, I don't really know exactly when yet. But
Nice.
look out for that. I'll be posting about that everywhere. And then the other one, and this is such a like such a stupid one right now because it's like one of the most boring spreadsheets I've made ever.
Mhm.
I really love RuPaul's Drag Race, the TV show. And so I have a spreadsheet of every episode cataloging how each contestant did each episode. And I'm making a like almost a statistical model of being
Mhm.
able to predict who's going to win the next season.
It's awesome.
And I'm slowly honing it down to like how soon can I predict. So this season, there's a season going on right now. We're like a few episodes away from the end. It has steadily predicted at least who's going home to within a relative degree of accuracy because like one person's eliminated every week. But my goal is to get it to a point where like by week 3, it's going to tell you who's going to win the whole thing.
Sweet.
So I'm that's the thing I'm probably going to be putting on co-host pretty soon of like, here's just how I make it and here's my thought process. And but it like if you just look at it with no context, it looks like taxes. So I'm just trying to find ways to like present it.
I think you'll figure it out. I think
Yeah.
RuPaul's Drag Race is like a great thing that has a lot of style already that like is going to lend itself well once you crack that egg and start making that omelet. I think that'll be awesome.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm excited for that. And then maybe that'll just kind of get the creative juices flowing again.
Great. Awesome. Thanks so much. This has been awesome. Thank you so
Yeah,
much
thank
for
you.
chatting
Thanks
with
for
me
having
for
me.
so long about spreadsheets. So weird.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's been great. It's been great. It's always good getting to chat.